So today we asked the question, what is the discount rate that managers should use to calculate a project's net present value? And this is the question that has been on everybody's mind for the past couple of weeks, I'm sure. Every time we do a net present value equation, you ask, what's the interest rate? So when we do an NPV, where there is some percentage rate out there, and we say, well, what is it? And you wait for the professor or somebody else to come in and tell you, well, you're going to do these cash flows at 14% or these cash flows at 15%. But where does that 15% come from? And I've put the question off for some time until we get to today. And so before we answer this question outright, let's talk about what capital structure looks like as a whole. Okay, there are two places where money can come from. What are they? Their money from a firm can come from money from a firm. I always get this drawing wrong. They can come from equity, or it can come from debt. Okay, and that's one of the first things that we do in the firm. We figure out where is the money coming from. Now, if it comes from equity, then we basically are coming from shareholders. And if money comes from debt, then it's coming from financial institutions. It's either coming from bonds or banks. In either case, we're dealing with financial institutions over there. Okay? And so the real question that managers ask isn't what the firm's cost of capital is, because this is what we're calculating here, cost of capital. What we're calculating is what is the cost of capital of the shareholders? What is the percent requirement of shareholders? And what is the percent requirement of the banks? Now, in this video, we're going to focus on the equity side for a minute, but that makes sense. You have an investor, and let's say that this is a stockholder, and the stockholder wants to invest into your firm. And the investor says, "Hey, look, I want I know that the S&P, I believe that the S&P 500 is going to give 12%. I don't want 12%. I'm willing to invest in your firm if you can give me a 15% return. Then I'll buy your shares." The the firm's managers then go out and identify projects. So the projects have to give some sort of return back to the firm that have, some sort of return. And if they take the money from the stockholder and they purchase equipment or do whatever it is that they're going to do at the firm, then the project has to have at least a 15% return, because you're taking the money from the stockholder. You're taking the money from the stockholder and you're dumping it into the firm. The firm is dumping it into the project, and you want that money to come back with enough return to the stockholder that we can get the 15% the stockholder wants. This is the stockholder's cost of capital. It costs him at least, or it should cost us, 15% to acquire his capital. On the other side, you have a bank or a bondholder. And the banks and the bondholders, it's a little different. The banks and the bondholders are willing to lend you money at some rates. Usually it's smaller than the equity cost of capital. And so this is going to be, let's say it's a 5%. It's a 5% loan. If this is the case, then the firm has to go out and select projects that have at least the 5% return. Now, if we select this project, does that give us at least a 5% return? Yeah, it does. So the bondholders are happy with that. And so that's what the firm managers now have to do. The firm managers have to make a decision as to which of these choices to take on, depending on this guy or this guy, which are the requirements of the interested holders. And if you notice, these guys provide equity and the banks provide debt. And that's where our capital structure comes from. So do we have a way of measuring? Let's focus just on equity for today, for this particular video. Do we have a way of measuring out the cost of capital for equity? Yes, we do. We can use the capm. Remember this guy? The capital asset pricing model. And the capm is really easy. It says our investor up here has to have, this guy has to have at least a 15% return. So what's our cost of capital? Our cost of capital is at least the 15%. Under this assumption, our firm has a 100% equity structure. 100% equity structure. Therefore, it's got to be 15%. But do we necessarily know how did our investor figure out that it was 15% required for him, depending on the risk of the firm? Well, the risk of the firm is easy to measure in our CAPM using beta. Remember beta? Beta is some measurement that's out there. And so what does our CAPM equation tell us? The CAPM equation tells us the expected return of the firm is equal to beta of the firm times the expected return of the entire market minus the risk-free rate, all of that plus the risk-free rate. And so what we're doing is taking a look at what the requirement is to the individual, and the requirement to the individual is held up by the expected return of the firm that the individual or the individual investor can calculate, and then we can figure it out from there. So let's make some assumptions here. The expected return of the firm, let's call it firm F, because we make frankfurters, I don't know, is equal to the beta of the firm, or let's use a real live example here. You know what? Let's back this up. Let's use a real live example. I have something ready over here off the screen. So let's do the expected return of Apple is equal to the beta of Apple times the expected return of the entire market minus the risk-free rate plus the risk-free rate. Okay? And so let's start substituting in some numbers. If I look at Apple, and here's my Yahoo Finance numbers, I see that beta is 1.35. You guys get that? Here's my beta. My beta of Apple is 1.35. Okay? So I'm going to take my beta and I'm going to just plug it in. Beta of Apple. I should make a list over here. Beta of Apple is 1.35. So I'm going to make this equal to 1.35. Is that more risky or less risky than the market? Well, since the beta is greater than 1, we say it's more risky than the market. And so let's just come up with an expected rate of return. If I take the S&P 500 over 20 years or 30 years or whatever, I'm going to get a number somewhere between 10, 11, and 12%. So let's say that the S&P 500 expected return is 10%. This is just an estimation that we're coming up with. And the risk-free rate right now, given the Fed, is actually less than 1%. So let's round it up to 1% just to come up with something relatively easy. And the risk-free rate is 1% again. So that's where our numbers come from. Okay, and then it's just simple mathematics. 1.35 times 9 plus 1. What is 1.35 times 9? Where's my calculator? 1.35 times 9 is equal to 12.15. So this is equal to 12.15 plus 1 is equal to, let me get this guy back in the screen. So that's equal to 13.15, and that is the expected return of Apple. What does that tell the investor? That tells the investor that if they were to invest in Apple, they would require a 13.5% return. This is the basic expectation of the investor. If Apple were to only have a capital or only accept capital from equity, then the investor turns around and turns to Apple and says, hey, Apple, you have to give me 13.5%. Apple then goes out and looks for a project. Let's call it project iPhone, I don't know, iPhone 15, because I have no idea when you're going to watch this. And by then we probably will be on iPhone 15. iPhone 15, and the iPhone 15 project values look as such. At time 0, it's going to require 1.1 billion to invest for development. In time 1, you'll make 500 million. In time 2, you'll make 400 million. In time 3, you'll make 100 million, because by then you're off at time, you're off at, actually, let's make that billions. Let's make that billions, just to make it easy. Oh, I don't like that at all. It's not realistic at all. Let's do that again. Let's do that again. At time 1, let's say our first total sales are 5 billion in the first year, and 3 billion in the second year, and then 1 billion in the third year, because at this point there's a new iPhone, and in the fourth year we're basically discontinuing sales at that point, and the project is dead. So Apple's managers, or the CEO or the CFO, has to say, hey, look, what is the net present value of iPhone 15? How do we calculate that? Well, I have estimated cash flows. It's going to cost me 1.1 billion to put the project together, and then I think I'm going to make 5, 3, and 1 billion for in the next couple of years. How do I then discount this net present value? And I discount the net present value and by cash flow 0 plus cash flow 1 over 1 plus R to the 1 plus dot 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 dot. So basically what I'm saying is, what is this R? What should I use? Well, if Apple only takes the equity into consideration, and the equity holders require a 13.5% cost of capital, then Apple should use a 13.5% rate of return or cost of capital when calculating what the net present value is. And for fun, let's do this real quick. I don't have my calculator with me. So I'll tell you what, I'll turn this into a practice problem. I'll turn this whole thing into a practice problem. We'll set it into a different video. And so this is going to give us some percent, some rate of return that originates from the investor. And the way we get that is by using the capm model. Again, the capm is equal to is the way that we calculate the expected return of some stock, and that is equal to the beta of the stock times the expected return of the market minus the risk-free rate plus the risk-free rate. And one easy way to find betas is basically just to go over to Yahoo Finance or any other major Yahoo and type in the number. So let's type in GE as an example. This switches over to GE. I can come over here to my beta. And the beta for GE is 1.2. If I type in something, how about McDonald's? I don't know what McDonald's is. McDonald's. Oh, I don't see McDonald's. Okay, what's another big major company? Let's find a big steel. United States Steel Corporation. There you go. U.S. Steel has a beta of 1.5. So you type in the company of choice, Twitter, and you can figure out what the beta is. Oh, except for Twitter, who apparently doesn't have one. What's the beta for Google? Google has a beta of 0.87, less risky than the market apparently. And so you can calculate the one you want. No problem. Plug it in here with your other basic expectations, and you can very simply get an expected return for the market. Thanks. Good luck. We'll see you as we move forward.